Hello everyone, hope you're having a magical day today. Today we are at the Cotton Gin Museum in Burton, Texas. So we're going to go in and check it out. So we're headed to the Cotton Gin now. $6 for this tour.
The video gave you a pretty good overview of our history and stuff like that, but our gin here, when it opened in 1914 and for most of its working life, really only served people within about a 5-mile radius of Burton. There were 4,000 gins in Texas in 1914 when we opened. The reason being is because of the transportation method that people were having to use to get their cotton to the gin. So wagons, just like the one behind me here, were the main means of transport. That will only hold enough to make one bale of cotton. And when you're using a team of mules to pull that, you don't want to go to Brenham. You want to go close. And so there was a gin about every 5 miles in cotton country in Texas. And that's why. Cotton harvest was very frantic this season. The threat of rain was always hanging over farmers' heads. Rain can, for extended periods of time, really damage the crop and of course hinder the harvest because the harvest was done manually by hand. And so that made it even worse, I guess is a good way to describe it. Now, to make a bale of cotton of just the lint, which is about 500 pounds, somewhere in the neighborhood of 500 to 600 pounds, you have to have 1,500 pounds of unginned cotton. And that's because there's 2 times the amount of seed that there is lint. Each little bowl of cotton can have up to 35 seeds in it. So you can understand why the cotton gin was such a revolutionary implement. It's because before then it had been hand pulling, and then after that it had been the churka, which looks like a wringer washing machine. And that worked somewhat, but still was not a quick method. You could never make a whole lot of money on cotton until the cotton gin came into being. So the first thing that a farmer would do when he got to the gin was have his cotton weighed, because that bale size is regulated because of, we got to ship it. We don't want a 300-pound bale next to a 900-pound bale. They're not going to stack well on a boat or other method of shipping. So the gin would weigh on a truck scale like this one here. This was installed in 1939, weighed every wagon that came through here until we closed in 1974. So, a couple of things they're looking for other than just the weight. They're looking for, you have wet cotton. Wet cotton will influence the weight, but it's also illegal as of 1918 to gin wet cotton. And that's because it can damage the fiber, because the cotton gin uses saws to pull the lint away from the seed. So instead of gently pulling, it's going to start to cut, which is not what we want it to do. The other thing they're looking for, cotton is usually harvested in August, which is the most miserable month in Texas, and you're getting paid a penny a pound to do it. You're expected to pick about 100 pounds of cotton at the very least, and so you can imagine it's August, it's 110 degrees, it's humid, it's hot, end of the day, you don't have quite enough cotton to make it to 100 pounds. So what are you going to do? You're going to do anything you can to weigh that sack down a little bit more so that when it gets to the P scale to be weighed before it goes into the wagon, you're good to go. So you get all kinds of little field stones and rocks and other things like that. We don't want those in our gin if possible, and that will influence the weight, of course. So you would have a gin employee kind of digging through, looking for rocks that may have found their way into the wagon. So if your cotton is dry, if you don't have any rocks and you have the right amount, the next step would be to have your wagon pulled underneath the sucker pipe over here. So the sucker pipe is the beginning of the air suction system. So when Eli Whitney invented the cotton gin, I'm not sure if he envisioned it being a community implement or a co-op implement the way that this is. What contributed to it being a community implement like it is today is the fact that before the Civil War, most cotton gins were on plantations because that's where the cotton was being grown, because they had the labor necessary to produce cotton with slaves. A plantation gin could produce about a bale or two of cotton a day, which was a good clip for them. That's one farm. That's all they're doing, right? These farmers out here, they might bring in a bale or two a day as well to the gin. But when the Civil War ended, and in this area in particular, the plantations had to sell their land. People bought what they could afford, but they can't afford their own cotton gin. So, but where are we going to gin our cotton? So that's when you start to see the rise of the community gin. What makes the community gin possible is the air suction system. Because now we can turn out a bale of cotton every 12 minutes. So you can push farmers through quickly, and they can get back to their fields, get more cotton, come back, have more bales made. So we could serve 40 to 50 farmers from the local area a day here and make 40 to 50 bales a day. So it was revolutionary. It was developed by a man named Robert Munger in 1883. So by 1914, that was the standard across Texas and its gins. So most of you have probably had a job where the first day they give you something somewhat easy to do until you kind of get eased in. That's the equivalent in the ginning business. You get to run the sucker pipe for the first few days because it's not a hard job to do. You know, it's anybody can do it. We have kids that sometimes help us do it on festival day. So that being said, the gins didn't want to waste a good employee on the sucker pipe when they needed them inside working the gin stands or the engine or the press box. And so what a lot of gins that were short-staffed would do is they would pay the farmer to do it, give him a slight discount on his ginning fee, and so that helped him out a bit. But that brings up ginning fee. So, for example, in 1925, when we bought the engine, it was $6 to gin your cotton. That included the wrapping around the bale. The farmer would pay that fee with the cottonseed he had left over, because cottonseed oil was such a big industry in the late 1800s and early 1900s. At one time, it was the second largest industry in Texas. So the gin wanted that seed because they could sell it to the oil mill. So they would pay a penny a pound for the seed, and then they would sell it for 9 cents a pound. And they had a seed house to hold it until they could transport it to a seed mill to have it pressed into oil. So it's a fairly win-win situation for everybody. Of course, the farmer, the producer, never gets the benefit that the middleman does, but it did help him to pay his ginning fee. And a lot of times he'd have a little bit of extra cash left over if he stopped at the saloon on the way out of town. Cotton farming's hard. So,
how many pounds of seed would normally be in a wagon load like that?
About 1,000 pounds. So quite a lot of seed. As time went on, the price got better. So we have a bale receipt from 1948 where they sold 1,010 pounds of seed for $75. So that was good. And the ginning fee was only like $4.30. So he walked with a pretty good profit. And I don't know what the price of cotton was in 1948, so I don't know how much his bale would have been, but it's not bad living.
Right.
But he may have only been producing 7 or 8 bales of cotton. So anyway, all right. Well, we'll head over here towards the engine room. These are usually about two gin bales worth of cotton. These bales here. This is the kind of the newest method of harvest. So for many years, they would take a cotton stripper through the field, and then they would dump it into a buggy, and then that buggy would take it to what's called a module builder. And the module builder would press it into a big cotton brick. It's about 15 bales worth. And then that bale would sit there with a tarp over the top of it, and it's not a super efficient means of transport because there's nothing holding it together. This, they decided to take a cotton stripper and turn it into a combine by putting a hay baler on the back of it, basically. And they wrap it in this nice round wrap. This one's about 2 years old, so that's why it's starting to fall apart. But it can hold together better outside that way because it has the plastic wrap around it. And you're also not going to have a lot of it flying off in the ditch on the way to the gin, the way that you... I lived in cotton country a good portion of my life. You can tell when someone's brought it out of the field because looks like it's snowed. The ditch is full of it. So anyway, Now, what's really cool about our gin is that it was all left intact. When they closed the doors in 1974, they didn't come back for a long time. And then in 1986, a guy from Burton, Ohio, and his wife came here, went across to the Mercantile across the street, ran into Mr. Modest, asked him what this building was, and he offered to give them a tour of it. And that was the rediscovery of the Burton Farmers Gin. So not only did they find all the equipment intact, but they found all of the business records still in the manager's office right upstairs. So while you were waiting in line to have your cotton ginned, that's where you would be going. Go talk some business real quick. So we have a pretty complete record of every farmer, every bale, every amount of seed that ever went through the Burton Farmers Gin here for 60 years. So the stereotype of small town folks being stubborn was a really good thing in this sense. And leave it alone, just leave it how it is, and we're very lucky to be blessed with this building today. So, all right, let's go see the cool stuff. Yeah, years and years. There's actually brick underneath here, believe it or not. Yeah, years and years of grease and oil buildup is
This is the main machine, right?
This is the engine that powers everything that gins the cotton. Yes, ma'am. So, this gin. The first one was a steam engine from 1914 to 1925. The steam engine had a few issues with it. So first of all, when you get enough water and heat mixed together, you have a lot of rust capabilities and a lot of things that can wear out. You also run into an issue of firewood consumption. So we were burning through about 200 cords of wood. They were burning through that amount of wood every ginning season. And so that got to be too much, and they said, okay, we gotta switch things up, and so they purchased this engine from Pennsylvania in 1925. So this is a Bessemer Type 4 oil engine. It cost over $7,000 with the shipping cost in 1925. Luckily, they were able to ship it to the door, so to speak, because the Houston and Texas Central Railroad was about 60 yards below us here on the flat. And so it pulled it there. They stopped the train, unloaded all the parts, and then drug the pieces up here by mule. Every team of mules and every man in town is what they said. And it took them a day and a half to drag everything up here, because this engine weighs 16 tons. So for all its impressive size, it only generates 125 horsepower. But what your car can't do is turn 57 feet worth of drive shaft. This engine's job is not to pull things, it's to turn things. And so we've got our flywheels here that are very heavy, and they are going to turn at 250 RPMs, and all that momentum is going to create a massive amount of torque. So about 2,000 foot-pounds of torque, which engineers tell me is a lot. So anyway, 57 feet of drive shaft is also very impressive, one continuous shaft that long. So those two things combined with our gin technology make us a national mechanical engineering landmark, actually. So we are registered in that, as well as the National Register of Historic Places. So, as most of you saw in the video, this engine requires good hot fuel, a good warm engine, but it also needs compressed air, because the fuel can't take those flywheels from a dead stop to a start. And so the handles that you saw the guy cranking in the video are right over there on the side. The top one is the blue handle, the bottom one is the red handle. The corresponding marks are on this big flywheel here, and so there's a red and a blue mark. And when you level those with the injection rod, like he explained in the video, that's when you start cranking to inject the air, and that's getting that turning. And eventually, if the engine's hot enough it'll take over and you can get it up to top speed. Now, as we come up the stairs here, please take a look in here, because this is what everything down here is connected to everything up there, and that's what's powering everything. So, so yeah, take a look as we head upstairs. As we're talking, please feel free to take a look inside. But these were upgraded in the 1930s from 50 saws a piece to 80, so we actually have 400 saws turning at once. We sent out a survey one time asking, like, gins, like, how big are you, you know, like what, and they, I saw quite a few that said they had 3 gin stands with 170 saw blades a piece. So pretty good sized stands. These were made by the Lummis Company, which at the time was out of Columbus, Georgia. They're now out of Lubbock, Texas. So Lubbock has become kind of the cotton hub of the United States now. So we have a board member who's pretty high up with Lummis, actually. So anyway, but this is where the separation happens. So the saw blades grab the lint and they pull it back behind, where it's taken off and then sucked via ductwork down to the press box to be made into a bale. And then you have the seed gets funneled down underneath, and there is a seed auger, a big screw underneath that is pushing the seed down to the bucket lift, which has been lifting the seed up to transport it a few different directions based on where they channel it. So it could go to the seed house, or it could go to a seed chute at the end for the farmer to pick up, because he's going to need some seed to replant as well. Generally anywhere from about 15 pounds to 40 pounds an acre for seed is what you're going to need for a farm. Just depends on how heavy you prefer to seed your cotton. So anyway, this is where it takes place. Now, like we talked about, the cotton comes in at the sucker pipe right outside here, and it comes in and it goes straight up and then over this duct here and down through where the round window is up there. So it falls down through there, so now gravity is helping the suction as well, so that's always helpful. And then it snakes its way down and around, and then you can open these, and this drops it in. So all 5 gin stands would be going at once.
So like a conveyor in there?
There is a conveyor, yes ma'am, and it's got tines on it that kind of help push it, facilitate, and it's not, like I said, you're still relying on some of the suction as well, but yeah, it's a fairly efficient process.
So what would happen if a stone would happen to get in there?
So the biggest issue that you'd run into is that it would dull the saw blades for sure. It could get lodged somewhere it's not supposed to, or it could cause a spark, which would lead to a smolder. So cotton doesn't, I don't know if anyone's ever burned their clothing before by accident, but you get a little round hole. It doesn't just, thankfully, it doesn't just take off. So you get that smolder, and so it's just going to kind of smolder around. It's going to be a little bit hot, and that can make its way all the way into a bale, and then that bale can basically just kind of generate heat in the center and just kind of eat its way out. It may never totally combust. You will see some flames, and definitely a lot of smoke, but it could ruin the bale and could potentially be a fire hazard for the gin. So that would be the biggest issue with a rock or a stone, which is why they actually have this here, the bowl trap, because anything heavier than a cotton bowl falls, everything else goes up. And so when they stopped pulling cotton, which is just pulling the lint out of the bowl, and started picking cotton, which is picking the whole bowl, they installed different equipment to separate the bowl out, but also to make sure that that weight wasn't going to also allow bigger rocks and things to get in, because there is quite a bit of suction on that gin. Guys talked about their hats and things like that getting sucked into the gin if they fell off their head. So anyway.
Now, what do they do? wait until the end of the season to maintain, like with the dust and fiber dust?
So I mean, they're doing obviously routine maintenance on things throughout the season as they need, but I don't necessarily know how much cleaning takes place during the ginning season because it is such a frantic endeavor for most of our. If they had a whole lot of time, I guess is what I'm saying. But
Yeah. Now, would the air be the same as it is up in the mills in Lowell?
It's definitely
Okay.
going to be a lot of lint floating around in the air, and we've got it, you know, just as bad in the sense that gin dust for us, all the dust coming off of the cotton because it's just coming out of the field and whatever molds and pollens have, you know, gotten in the cotton. Are you from Lowell, Massachusetts, or?
Well, yeah.
Okay, cool. That's cool. We actually have a lady that lives in Austin that is an artist. She's going to be at our festival this year and has been doing some research with us. I think her and her husband are originally from that area as well, and that's why I was asking.
Yeah, no. If you're ever in the area, it's definitely worth going into.
Yeah, because
to see the weaving.
Right.
Noise. Unbelievable.
Yeah. That's
really
why I was wondering. That's the one town that I really think of when I think of the textile mills in the northern cities is Lowell, Massachusetts, because that's one we see quite often. But well, cool. Yeah, very neat. So while the separation takes place here, both the seed and the lint are still moving in the same direction. Just the lint's on that side, seeds on this side. So we'll come on down this direction. And this is where the seed auger spits out right here. And so this is the bucket lift. These are the bucket lift, and so they lift up, and they can eventually be dumped into either this auger or this auger. This auger goes to the seed house. This auger goes to the seed chute.
The seed chute would be if the farmer wanted to take it back.
Yes, ma'am. Because he's definitely, we're definitely in the era of guys have been cultivating their own seed for years. It's just like any other crop, and they want to keep track of that because they know they can predict how that's going to go, and so that's very important. Now there's actually a law. A lot of seed companies will not allow you to replant your seed year to year. You have to buy new seed every year. So
how can they regulate that?
Well, I think part of the issue comes into covering themselves slightly, because if you continue to plant their seed year after year and the yield goes down, then that could reflect back on the company. But it also does create a market of the farmer having to come back year after year and buy new seed.
So a farmer has to register their seed when they buy it?
They do, yes. They have to have a permit for their seed.
And if you don't do that and you grow cotton, then you get fined or what?
Yeah, you get fined pretty heftily, yeah. So they have to have permits for the seed, I believe. I know with corn and things you do. But with you have to have a permit to grow it with the boll weevil eradication folks, because they need to know where to put traps and where to monitor. So, which our boll weevil guy told us, we were gonna try to plant maybe a 1/4 acre or something. We were talking about we're not gonna plant anything that big really, and he was like, oh yeah, you definitely need a permit for something that big.
Huh.
So, but anyway. So this is the condenser. This is where the lint makes its way through, and then it falls down into the press box here. The press box goes down about 15 feet because cotton will compress quite a lot, and so we want to pack it as tightly as possible. So we'll come around here on this side. What is a beautiful day today.
Yes.
It is.
Gotten to do 2 tours of the gin today, so I've been very, very blessed to be outside most of the day today. So, all right. So for those of you that saw the video, this is the Wheel of Fortune that she talks about. Like I said, chute goes down about 15 feet. You can kind of see on the inside here, there's a series of paddles that kind of help facilitate the flow down into the press box. Once the press box is full, it would then be rotated because we have a hydraulic floor press underneath that side. And that's because we can press a bale there while the next farmer's cotton is coming into here. So we remain somewhat seamless if possible, while also keeping everybody's cotton separate. So that's very important, because if Farmer Jones has crap cotton, you don't want Farmer Jones's crap cotton in with your good cotton. So
What if a farmer doesn't bring in enough cotton to make a bale?
So there are penalty rates. So there's actually this here is from the 1954-55 season. So they may not accept the bale if it's over 700 pounds, but you know, for your 434 pounds to 400, they'll charge $1 fee. They'll hit you pretty hard if you're under 400 pounds. And it's a matter of transportation for the infrastructure. It's not going to pack well, it's not going to ship well, and the textile mill is not going to be getting its money for it, so to speak, either, if it's got less than that. So anyway, I'll give this thing a turn. The bearings on it are still in really good shape. It also doesn't have 500 pounds of lint in it, so well. Turns pretty easy. So this one would be full at that point, and there's a lever over by the seed auger, the bucket lift that engages the press, and so you would engage that. Press slowly comes up, presses it together, and then you would open this. This is a doorway. It opens out flat so that you can get to the bale to wrap it with the jute, but also to wrap it with the bands here. So these metal bands would fit through these slots and go down and around. It's very similar to a machine called a hay press, which was the first hay baling machine, basically. So it's very similar to that. And then it would buckle in the center. It literally just looks like a belt buckle, and that's all it is right there. So yeah, you don't want to tighten it down too hard, because what's going to give you the tension is releasing the pressure from the press, and that's going to pop it out. Exactly. It's going to stretch it back out because it's trying to swell back to its original size. I do the experiment with our kiddos when they come in to explain it to them. Is, you know, this looks really dense, you know, and then you do that. But what happens when you let go of it? It tries to start expanding back out to its size, and so that's an easy experiment for them to see. Before it comes out of the press and before you release the tension, you do want to put a bale tag on it. So this bale tag would be the ID card for that bale, so to speak. So it would identify the gin it came from, and the big number would identify the farmer in our records, basically. So we would stamp the numbers on. Each number is unique to that bale and to that farmer. So that would be helpful if there was, like, if the mill really liked the cotton, they could get in touch with us so we could track that number, figure out whose it is, and then if they wanted more bales, we could potentially find those for them. So anyway, the last step, it comes over here to the P scale. So this is the scale, and the weight over here, this is the P, which stands for poids, which means weigh in French. And so you work it down until this thing levels out. You've got your weight. So I think in the video it says it's a 520 pound bale. So that would be about perfect. It's a great bale. And then it would be marked on a bale receipt. That'll get shoved down onto the loading dock, picked up by a truck or a wagon for many years. And then the rusted roof building way down there is our cotton warehouse, and that's where it would be taken. Or farmer could take it home. That was quite common too. So I was told by one of our local guys here that one of the tricks of the trade is a farmer would take their bale home and find a rock slab or a concrete slab to put it on, and that bale would soak up that moisture off of that. Now it's a little bit heavier, so that when the buyer weighs it, you get a little bit of extra out of it. Another trick of the trade was the way that the cotton was loaded into the gin and into your wagon. So at the end of it all, when you're ready to grade your cotton to see what the price is going to be for it, you cut a sample out of the bale. You cut your sample out of the center of the bale. So where does that go in your wagon? It goes in the center. You want your good cotton in the center of the wagon. If you got the end of your field, you don't want that in the middle, because that's probably, piddly little cotton. You want your good, big middle of the field stuff, if possible, or your best quality in the middle of the wagon. And then you do a grid pattern to sucker that up into the gin. Hopefully it'll end up in the middle, so when you cut your sample, you're putting your best foot forward, so to speak, with that. From what I understand, I don't know a whole lot about cotton grading, other than the names of some of the grades, but they're looking at the length of the fiber, width of the fiber, and the color of the fiber are a few of the things they're looking for. So they'll grade that based on a scale of fair, middling, and ordinary. And then there are half and quarter grades in between that, like strict low middling would be a grade, that they give, and then that would be the price that it's based off of. So the most famous is fair to middling. So cotton is an incredibly important part of Texas's history, of course. But one of my favorite things to prove that is that they, the fair to middling is said nationwide, not just in Texas. But Brenham would have a big parade for the first bale ginned in Washington County every year. They'd parade that bale through downtown Washington County. Proud of it. So it's pretty cool how big cotton was here at one time, and to think that we're at this point about 50 years removed from having this gin operational all the time, and having nothing but cotton fields around here. 50 years. You're talking, kids, 2 generations of kids have grown up without seeing a cotton farm in this area. So. But cotton is alive and well in Texas, though. We produce about 7 million bales of cotton a year, which puts us in the top 10 most years in the world production. But we're the #1 producer in the United States here. The northwest part of our state and also along the coast are both areas that are very heavy cotton growing regions today. So yeah. We have 198 gins statewide as of last year. A lot less than 4,000, but things have changed. The way agriculture is done has changed. Guys don't think a whole lot about shipping their cotton 40 or 50 miles to be ginned, and they have the technology and the ability to do it now. So that number just means that everything's changed, but cotton's doing well.
Now, your gins, they don't need water power or anything like that anymore?
So no, most gins are run on electric motors, or from what I understand now, are just big engines. And I do know of a few in the very early days of ginning in Texas that were water powered. There was a water powered gin. I was reading about one at Knickerbocker, Texas, which is out in Tom Green County by San Angelo, Texas. They had apparently a water-powered gin there for a little while, very short-lived gin. But for the most part, gins have always been powered by a couple of different methods: a steam engine of some kind, an internal combustion engine like what we've got, electric motor, or even farther back, a horse treadmill. If you've ever, for draft horses to walk on this big treadmill with a belt attached, that was a way of powering some of the smaller plantation-type gins. In India, they still have manually fed gins in a lot of areas. India is the #1 producer of cotton in the world most years.
Is Is India cotton a better grade of cotton?
I'm not necessarily sure where we fall in grades. I know India has a lot of cotton, and I'm assuming that they do have a good quality. I've been told that a lot of some of the places in the Middle East that grow it have really good quality. Like I was told at one point that Israel has really good quality cotton, and they have the best irrigation system in the world. I mean, everyone wants to get their hands on their irrigation technology. You know, Egyptian cotton is really talked up a lot, of course. Yeah. So it's you know, I'm not exactly sure where we fall into that category as how ours grades out. I had a guy from South Africa one time just tell me what Texas cotton was not worth anything or something like that. You know, I really can't. I don't know. You know, maybe you're telling the truth, maybe you're not.
So that was my day out at the cotton gin. Thank you for watching and have a magical day.